Hello and welcome to the latest Retire Well episode with Wealth Advice. I'm Matthew and I'm joined by
Joe.
And today we're going to talk about annuities versus drawdown, and we're going to compare a couple of scenarios to think where either the annuity or the drawdown could work best. In the last few episodes we've obviously talked about the pros and cons of both the annuity and drawdown, so this is really building upon that and also some of the conversations we've been having with clients recently.
Yeah, absolutely. As Matthew said, we thought it would be good to almost bring the debate to life by looking through a few different scenarios. Obviously, we're not going to be able to provide financial advice on the podcast, but hopefully get you thinking about things that can help you make decisions coming up to retirement. So I'll start with the first case study. Case study one, we've got Alan and Barbara. They're both 55 years old. Alan's got £500,000 in a defined contribution or money purchase pension pot. Barbara has £15,000 in defined benefit income, so that's income that's guaranteed for the entirety of her life, and then they both will be entitled to a full state pension when that comes around. The requirement that they came to us for was £40,000 annual income, so sort of a rough shortfall of £25,000 when you take into account Barbara's DB income already. Matthew, sort of walking through the door, what would be the first sort of things you'd be looking at with this sort of client, and when it comes to annuities and drawdown, what are your initial thoughts?
I think firstly with Alan and Barbara, with those figures you've described and the income retirement they're looking for, they've obviously done well to build up a good level of pensions, and they can essentially go down either route. I think that then is where their attitude to risk and what they're looking to achieve becomes quite a key point. So because they've already got the state pensions to come, which are inflation linked and guaranteed, and they've also got that defined benefit pension, guaranteed income and payment for Barbara from the teacher's pension. So again, that's another guaranteed income source. So do they need to annuitize, with Alan's defined contribution pension to have more guarantees, or would drawdown give them more flexibility? For me, the medium level of risk and being able to tolerate some volatility probably suggests that drawdown and being able to be a bit more flexible with it would work, but I could see it going either way. What's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm on a similar line to that one. So with that 500,000 pension pot, even with a pretty modest annuity rate of 5%, and as we've discussed in previous episodes, we have seen them go up, so it might actually be more than that. Alan could generate almost a £25,000 income from that he'd have for the rest of his life. And then that'll be great. That'll be them sorted. They wouldn't have any more worries about whether they've got income coming in. But obviously they do have their state pensions that they'll get at 67, 68, depending on when they're entitled to it. Which means when they're after that age, they're going to have a real large surplus in income. And we tend to see with clients, especially that in the early years of retirement, you do all your spending, you do a lot of the travelling, do all the bits that you really want to do with your retirement, and then tend to see a little bit of a slowdown, just naturally. So it might be the case that although they need $25,000 a year now, when they get to sort of that state pension age, they might be quite happy with just relying on that as a guaranteed income.
Yeah, I think currently I would describe them as having sort of a Hovis approach. They've got the best of both worlds. They've got the risk-free and they've got the invested pot there as well. The real sort of questions I would have to sort of challenge them on now would be to say, how much do they want to vary their income in retirement? Have they got any lump sums that you've described? And equally, what's their family situation? What do the death benefits look like? With an annuity and a defined benefit pension, the biggest frustration people have is the lack of flexibility and the lack of death benefits. So if they did have children and grandchildren, and they, when the state pension kicks in, their needs are going to be pretty much met, maybe drawdown is the way they would prefer to go and take what they need, what they want when they want it, and then anything left they know they can leave 100% of whatever's left to the next generation. So I think that's where we push it, but again, that main starting point of they've done very well, they've built up the pensions, and now it's an art, not a science, how they sort of refine it. I had a guy who was in the office today who was thinking about his defined benefit pension. Again, we could look at that very similar to an annuity, and he was saying, okay, actually, because I'm widowed, I would see a lot more benefit in moving to a flexible pot, or even moving to an annuity where I can pick my own terms and build in that 30-year guarantee period, because he has got a son and grandchildren who we would rather see benefit than thinking, okay, when I die, it's all gone, which is, Barbara's defined benefit pension would go that way.
Yeah, I think the death benefits on this one, although obviously not the immediate need, they're looking at the income is obviously one to think about. If Alan does decide to go down that annuity route, he does have to start thinking about how much guaranteed period is he going to build in. And on the flip side, if Barbara was to pass away prior to Alan, then he's got 100% flexible income from that £500,000 pot. So it's at that point which he may look at going, well, actually, I've done all my spending. I'm happy to almost lock in an annuity, and that's one of the advantages of going down the drawdown approach. Is that you could buy an annuity at any point in the future, whereas if you go down the annuity approach, you're very much pigeonholed down that route, and you don't have the future flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in this case study, if you knocked off Barbara's defined benefit pension, maybe there's more, they could say, okay, well, we do want some guaranteed income sources, so they could almost have the idea of doing a partial annuity, using some of Alan's pot to buy an annuity to cover maybe the personal allowance, and that way you get your tax allowances and you've still got the flexibility of drawdown on top of it perhaps. So yeah, definitely a good one. And if Alan and Barbara were listening, would say definitely get in touch, definitely seek advice, because there's 4 or 5 different ways that you could achieve what you might be looking to do. So let's work through the pros and cons of each to see which one works best for them.
Yeah, great. So moving on to case study 2, we've got a slightly different one here. So we've got Julia, who's a little bit older. She's 60 years old. She's got a £400,000 pension pot with 4,000 in savings. That's fully flexible, so similar to the above. She's got her state pension coming in 7 years' time, which will be 11,500, and DB pension income of around 25,000 when she reaches age 65. She was looking at sort of an income requirement of around 35,000, and she was more on the sort of conservative side, didn't see herself as much as a risky person. So initial thoughts on that one, Matthew?
I think when we look at the annuity, it suits a low-risk investor who can't tolerate investment fluctuation and the idea that investments could scare them. So almost jumping straight through to that conservative, low level of risk, an annuity would seem like a sensible approach. But in the same way as Alan and Barbara, good level of funds, good level of flexibility, so you could go down an approach of some annuity income to get her to where she needs to be. Because the defined benefit pension is starting in 5 years' time, and that's covering a lot of her income requirement, and then the state pension is also going to cover, take that, top it up completely. There's an argument that drawdown might actually suit her better in terms of the flexibility to start and stop income. But if you can't tolerate the risk of drawdown, you can't tolerate the investment risk, the charges, then annuity would be the way to go. So I think this one is almost a sensible approach with the annuity, but if she was on the cusp of a risk decision and she had the capacity for loss to tolerate some volatility and maybe was a bit more comfortable over time, drawdown could also potentially work.
Yeah, I think this one would be a good one to almost sit down with Julia and have a little bit of an educational piece on looking at the pension pot and what it can do, because as you said, Matthew, it's only 5 years until she gets a DB income, and then 7 years she's completely catered for. If she can't make the £400,000 last for that 7 years, or even tolerate the risks, then obviously an annuity could be the way forward. But I think rationally, it almost looks like it makes sense to go down drawdown, but human beings aren't rational beings, and at the end of the day, and it'll come down to what she feels.
The questions I would ask her would be, she's built up a £400,000 pension pot. That doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. So how has she felt on that journey? So unless it's something like a pension sharing order and that pension's just dropped into her name, she's probably seen it fluctuate. She's probably seen, we often talk about COVID as the example. We say to people as part of our risk questionnaire, COVID came along and the FTSE 100 fell by 30%. What did you do? Did you sell everything? Did you change your investment strategy? Or did you stick to the plan? The right answer is, of course, do nothing and stick to the plan. But like you've just described there, that's based on a rational long-term decision, not a panic and not that short-term mindset. So I think if she did nothing, and if she has had the pension invested over time, she can probably tolerate enough of investment risk to carry on and do drawdown, but she has to be completely comfortable that her pension could fluctuate by 10%, and if it fell by 10%, would it impact her standard of living? If the answer to that's no, you can think about drawdown more. Probably like with Alan and Barbara, we know her primary objective to provide income. What's her secondary objective? What's her third objective? If it is to leave a legacy, if it is death benefits, does she have any lump sum requirements? Maybe she wants to be able to take lots of lump sums for holidays or to gift to family members. So again, it's a reoccurring theme that there's no right answer for everyone, but it identifies itself as you work through the pros and cons. And quite quickly, a conversation with Julia, she might say, I've had a pension, it's grown because I've worked hard and I've had a high salary, but actually I've never looked at my values. Now, as I approach retirement, I've looked at it a bit and it scares me that it can drop by £2,000 in a day. And when it goes up by £4,000, I don't feel as happy as I do worried when it falls.
Yeah, one thing just to finish on this one, because I have recently been going through my exams to get towards chartered level. I think the textbook answer on this would be, because she's low risk, you could potentially look at sort of a short-term annuity to fill that gap between sort of no income being fully covered to having everything fully covered. In reality, is that something that we necessarily recommend? There's not overly many providers that do that in the market.
Yeah.
But I suppose you could look at that and explore the options with Julia.
Yeah, I was going to say to Jerry, I'm chartered, I've already got the badge, so I can come in with the answer. No, I think you're right. I think if it was a textbook, if it was an exam, we'd be looking at it, we'd be thinking about it. In reality, there's limited providers who do that short-term annuity, so therefore it seems to be less effective than going and doing the full one for life. It's a bit frustrating because we do have people who come and say, I have got a window of 5 years or 10 years or 7 years and I want to spend money in that period. Can you build me that annuity? And the answer, like you said, is yes, but the real answer is, okay, the rates might not be that competitive or the providers are very limited and you're stuck with what you've got. So in reality, I've never done it. I've seen it written in exams, but I've not actually recommended one myself.
Yeah, sure. So moving on, we've got case study 3. So Brian and Linda, 62 and 65 respectively. Brian has 20,000 in, again, final salary, DB income, which is in payment, and the death benefits on that are 50% of his pension. So 10,000 would go to Linda if he was to pass away. And also has a 300,000 in a defined contribution pension. Linda has another DB pension of 15,000. They've got an income requirement of around 40,000 per annum, and I suppose the niche or caveat in this one is that Brian's in ill health and wants to make sure that if he was to pass away early, Linda would be sort of fully provided for in retirement.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. Again, the numbers stack up as being a good, strong position. I think if it was a textbook or if it was an exam answer, the ill health probably becomes the main area of topic of conversation. We've helped a lot of people retire, and that comes with people in good health and people in bad health. I've looked after a few people recently who are in ill health and really want to make sure they've got their ducks in a row so they don't have to worry about that side of it. So again, what things are we thinking about here? Levels of risk, what's the income shortfalls, and making sure everyone's provided for. Brian, who is in ill health, has that defined benefit pension in payment. If he was to pass away, we know that halves. Again, that's a household question where you say, your income's going to half going forward. If he passes away, we don't know if it is as bad as that. But what would the expenditure of the household look like? Would it be more? Would it be less? His £300,000 defined contribution pension, if he passes away before 75, that's left completely tax-free to his beneficiaries. So you've got the idea that Linda could have that income source and take what she wants when she wants. But equally, what's their family situation? Would, leaving some money to children? Again, if he's passing away before 75 in this scenario, children could have access to that and take it. They don't have to wait till they reach retirement age. So again, that could work towards the family paying off mortgages, paying off debt. And because Linda is slightly older, she's 65, if she was to inherit the whole pot tax-free and then live beyond 75 with the pension, she would then, her beneficiaries will be paying tax at their marginal rate. So I think there's definitely a planning opportunity to think about the order of the death benefits and what they're looking to achieve. But equally, the primary beneficiaries are still, Brian, to make sure he's enjoying retirement, making sure they're making the most of it, and having the spending power. What would you add to that? What would be your thought
I mean,
process?
I think one thing to sort of, I suppose, pick up on there on Brian's ill health is he could go down a annuity route with that DC pension, and he would be able to get that guaranteed income for life if that's what he wanted. And given that he is in health, he might be able to qualify for enhanced annuity rates. So instead of the standard sort of 5 or 6%, he might be looking at sort of 6 or 7 or potentially even more, depending on how serious his health is. I suppose the drawback of that is he's wanting to make sure that Linda's cared for and has that income when he passes away. One thing that we spoke about previously is guaranteed periods on annuities, which we see as sort of really powerful. You used to be able to only get a 5-year or 10-year guarantee, but now you can get sort of 20, and we've been recommending a couple of sort of 30-year guarantees. So a guarantee like that on annuity would ensure that Linda is provided for if Brian was to pass away, but I suppose the drawback is you can't have both an enhanced annuity through ill health and a sort of a guaranteed period of 30 years, because they're not going to pay you the larger amount of income because they think you're going to pass away soon, and also guarantee that for 30 years. So that's, I suppose, one thing to weigh up if they do go down the annuity route on what do they need. And looking at the current income, I'd say probably the guaranteed period is more valuable to them than that sort of initial enhanced income that Brian could get.
Yeah, I agree completely on that, why would you want to have more income over a shorter period of time when you're also thinking about the death benefits? So I think if you took away Brian's defined benefit pension, maybe there's a more income need, and maybe that's where an enhanced annuity could add value. But I think the flexibility of the death benefits and drawdown probably is the starting point, as long as they have got the attitude to risk to tolerate it. I had a very similar scenario to this recently, and it was a client who ended up passing away at just 60. And again, you sort of think that's a wasted retirement, or lots of time when they could have done the things they want to do on the bucket list. But with the planning and having the defined contribution pension nominated to the wife and to the son, it did mean that the son could pay off some of his mortgage, and the wife had tax-free income that means that she's going to be financially secure. So it's a really sensitive area where we don't want to say to someone who's just been diagnosed with something, do this, change that. But what we do want to do is to say, we're here to help them make the decision, to make it easy for them, and the logistics of it. Death benefits with a pension essentially can be, you might miss one income payment, but it could be paying again in 2 months' time. That's brilliant for the peace of mind of someone saying, okay, my household is going to be secure, we're not going to run out of money. And when you have got other income sources like that defined benefit pension, there's going to be a period of time when that drops and halves. Again, expenditure might change in retirement. So it's a real tough one as a family to work out what you need and when, but hopefully with good advice, it can make that sort of time a bit more easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that one. Our final case study today is slightly different to, I suppose, the first three that we've run through. We've got Mark, who's 57 years old. He's got a £400,000 pension pot, no guaranteed income outside of the state pension, but obviously still quite a long way off for Mark, at least 10 years away. He's got an income requirement of £40,000 per annum. He essentially just wants to try and replicate what his current salary pays in retirement. He wants to retire early as possible, now if possible, but is concerned potentially about running out of money, and did sort of say he's high risk, I suppose, investor.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think how much is enough is a common question that we get, and it's a question that we tried to cover a little bit in a video. For Mark, how much is enough to provide £40,000 per annum? That seems like quite a chunky income for someone who's 57 with £400,000 in a pot. If the FCA say a safe withdrawal rate might be around 4%, and that might be over a 30-year period, again, Mark's life expectancy is likely to be, 85, 86, 87. So when you come and look at that, you say, you might want to rethink it. You might say, can you afford to retire? Can you reduce your expenditure? Can you bring that, income requirement down? Or would you rather work for another couple of years to be certain and secure? So, an annuity rate, if you were to think about an annuity for him, what sort of guaranteed income could he get?
Yeah, again, I know we always base it on a 5%, but it's there or thereabouts. You'd be looking at sort of 20,000 per annum taxable income, it should say, that's going into Mark. So obviously a good 20,000 short of what his requirement is of 40,000. So I'd say off the bat, you look at discounting that, it doesn't quite get him where he needs to be. With him being a little bit younger, he's not going to get quite as good annuity rate as if he came to us in 10 years' time. I think it's one where it's almost reassessing what he wants to do. If he's certain on retiring, is it the case where he needs to bring that income requirement down? Does he maybe need to work a little bit longer and build it up? Or, to be honest, we're not in sort of a binary world when it comes to retirement. You don't have to be employed or retired. What we see quite a lot of the time with clients is a bit of mix and match for that could work. And to be honest, I think might be the thing that Mark could build on.
I think you've stolen my thunder, because partial retirement was going to be exactly what I suggested. I saw someone this week who, has already started the wind down. He's already stopped working on Friday. And again, the mindset of that is brilliant, to say, I'll stop working on Friday, then I'll start working on Monday, and I know what retirement looks like. And equally, the employer can then say, well, we know we've got a cover of that person because we do it on the Monday and Friday. I think that's a good way to do it, and you can use the pension to help facilitate that. So in Mark's scenario, if he's got a high attitude to risk and he can tolerate volatility, which he can, you then say, okay, £100,000 of that pot is available as tax-free cash. Why don't you say, if I drop a day and I need a little bit of extra income, maybe you don't need the full amount, but maybe you take a few £100 a month there to top up your income, and then when you look to drop another day, you can turn that tap up again, and the end result there is that you've phased your lifestyle into retirement, and ultimately you might have been taking a little bit from the pension, to help him in retirement, but he's still working, so he could be still topping it up. And as long as you don't take any taxable income, he hasn't triggered the money purchase annual allowance, so he hasn't, restricted the amount he can save into a pension going forward. So, what is Mark's primary objective? If he really, really wants to retire and he's sick of work, he needs to be clear on how much he's willing to, reduce his lifestyle to and what his spending might look like. If he's stuck on that figure, then can he meet in the middle and have some sort of partial retirement? And I think, I'd hope, Mark hasn't just suddenly got out of bed one morning and said, I want to finish and this is how much I want. We often talk to people now with a plan to retire next year, or we talked to them last year and the year before with a plan of, when might be enough. I had an email drop in my inbox this morning, which was from a guy saying, I haven't spoken to you for a year, not sure if you remember me. You told me, it was enough, and I still wasn't quite sure I was ready. I'm ready now, so can we start the ball rolling? So, maybe this is the first chat with Mark to say, this is what retirement could look like, can frame it to him, and therefore in a year's time, when he's 1 year closer to, state pension, when he's got an extra year of contributions in, maybe at that point, it is achievable.
Yeah, I think it is good that Mark has that goal of retiring and has that amount that he knows, because that, to be honest, for a lot of people that we speak to, is the hardest part of knowing what will you need to sustain yourself sort of for the longer term of retirement. So now that he's got that, it might be a case of, like you say, reassessing, do we need to put more into the pension? How would he feel about working an extra few years to make sure that you can have a full retirement, as opposed to almost just sort of scraping by. I think.
How accurate do you think people's expectations of spending are? When someone comes in there and says, this is what I need to spend, do you think it tends to be accurate?
If it was the Price is Right, I don't think we'd be winning any prizes on that one, Matthew. Sometimes it's over, sometimes it's under, but yeah, I think it very much comes down to the individual, where they think they're going to retire and spend the exact same. And how many people would you say have the exact right amount figure first time?
I think one or two who love a spreadsheet, they probably can get the number spot on. But apart from that, I think you're right, there's a range. I would say the majority of people who think they need a certain number to retire actually don't need that full amount, because they're almost pricing in, well, I want a bit more to spend here, I want a bit more to spend there, but they're not knocking off the travel to work, they're not knocking off other things. So
potential mortgage.
Or holidays, people are in school holidays, again, you almost say, they're used to spending a certain amount of money. Mortgages is a really good one you mentioned there. People who are debt-free approaching retirement, that is often, one of those really aspirational moments. And I think as soon as you're then, paid off debt-wise, income is all your own, and it gives you more surplus, which you can then also think about saving more into a pension. And then when you do finish, you've got more built up in the war chest. So I think, again, I'd love to chat to Mark to sort of work out where the land lies and what's more important. If Mark was to talk to Brian, who's in ill health, Brian would probably say, what the hell are you doing, Mark? Get yourself retired, enjoy it while you can, get that bucket list and work through the things you want to do. £40,000, might be what you want aspirationally, but how much do you currently spend now? I often say to people, look at your bank account for 6 months, look at, every time you're paid, is the money going up, is it going down, are you spending more than you're bringing in, or is it vice versa? And that can be a really good bellwether. And often, people are nervous to jump into retirement, so that's why they put a barrier to say, well, I want the same level of income now as I've had in retirement, in retirement as I've had now even. But when you flip it the other way, you say, okay, well, that might be enough to pay off your mortgage, that might be enough for trips to Florida, that might be enough for lots of these other things that you might start to do less of in retirement, plus you've got a state pension to come. So I would often say, time is important, and if you delay retiring, you're never going to get that year back. But you might theoretically go, I'm never going to spend that extra money that I've accrued.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty happy with them. I think we've covered all those case studies pretty well and hashed a few things out. We did have a couple of sort of Q&As on the end, one of which we've pretty much covered actually in Mark's case study of should I pay my mortgage off in retirement. I always see it as very much a personal view. Some people are happy with having debt, some people don't like having the debt. It was probably a much easier conversation a few years ago when mortgage rates and interest rates were very low, because then you could just say, well, let's just keep it on until the fixed term runs out and then look at paying it off. Now that interest rates are slightly higher, although they are coming down, then there's a little bit more of a conversation of, can we guarantee that an investment is going to outperform your mortgage? The answer most likely is no. So then it more comes down to whether you should pay off or not.
Yeah, I think paying off your mortgage is like that. I've paid off my house, my castle, is completely paid off, and it brings down expenditure. So I see it as a very good, goal for getting retirement ready to say, okay, what is my debt? Am I bringing it down? We had a conversation recently with someone who had, a car loan, had some finance on a conservatory or some windows. Again, it was like, okay, I can afford to pay that off, and I've had the money, I just haven't because I haven't needed to, and it's been cheap. As I get to the point, drawing a line in the sand when I'm retired, I don't want that extra couple of £100 a month hanging over on top of my expenditure. I want to have that squeezed as low as possible so that they would have that minimised. Some people also go, I've got a pension which I'm going to use some of my tax-free cash to pay off debt. Again, that could be the same thing. It's almost being debt-free, entering retirement, and I've got some tax-free cash there and I've got some debt. The two can net off quite nicely. But yeah, in general, the more debt you carry into retirement, the more baggage you've got, and the more you haven't got the discretionary to spend the income in retirement, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. The second Q&A we've got for today, I suppose, is can I continue to pay into my pension after I've retired? Something that people don't realise they can do. I suppose spoiling the answer to that one. But yeah, the answer is yes, you can pay into your pension once you're retired. It very much depends on how much income you have, but even if you have no income whatsoever, you can top 2,880 into your pension, which the government then tops up to 3,600. Matthew briefly touched on the money purchase annual allowance, which could limit your expenditure. Matthew, do you just want to run through that quickly?
Yeah, so the money purchase annual allowance essentially means that someone can put 100% of their net relevant earnings into a pension. That isn't pension income, that isn't rental income, so that is taxed earned income. And if you then take any taxable income from your pension, that reduces from a maximum figure of £60,000 down to £10,000. So you definitely don't want to trigger that when you're still working and intending to contribute. But once you're ready and you sort of say you're done, again, you can easily and be happy to do so. And that £10,000 figure still allows people to put regular payments in if they need to. As you described, we've got quite a few people who go, okay, I quite like a little bit of tax relief from the government. I quite like that £720. So a contribution of 2,880, the government putting their £720 in, up to age 75. It seems like if you've got that capacity to do it, why not? It also can help balance the pension savings. So again, if you had the wife with the main pension and the husband had limited savings, every year you could top that up to get to a little bit of, they've got a bit more spending power. So we quite like it, and it definitely adds value. And I think the final question that we had to sort of talk about was, people often say, my business, if you're talking to a company director, my business is my retirement, or if someone's got a lot of property, they say, my properties is my retirement. What do you think, or what's your standard answer on that one?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of people do have that, and it is a benefit to have a business asset that you can sell into retirement. You can get a nice lump sum, and then you can have all the problems that we've listed above about how do I draw from that lump sum, do I annuitise, and that sort of thing. I suppose it's not necessarily whether it's bad to just have your business as your pension, but it's more so maybe even the benefits when you're actually earning and running that business that a pension can bring. So one of the big things is you could make an employer contribution if you have a limited company, pay from your company into the pension before corporation tax is taken off, and then any earnings within that pension is completely tax-free. And yeah, that's one of the big things that I see with regards to my business as a pension. It's not necessarily mutually exclusive. It's about using them both together sensibly as part of sort of an overarching financial plan.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, I've got a company director who's currently going through a process of selling the company, and if he was fully reliant on that sale, that would be a tough place to be. But over the years, by making those pension contributions, there's actually a second pot which can give them extra taps and extra income sources in retirement, and it makes you less reliant on that sale ultimately. And plus, from a corporation tax point of view, it's a business expense, any contribution in there, so you've got a great tax saving. People who say, my property is my pension, again, can make sense why they do it, because that can be a really good way to make money, but you're limited from the flexibility of, the tax is the tax, and you can't do what we've described with the pensions in the sense of pick your income and pick what matches you. And ultimately, a pension and annuity are both products that have been designed to help people in retirement. Property and renting, that's not how it's designed.
Yeah, absolutely. So key takeaways for this episode, I think everyone is in different positions. Hopefully by running through the case studies today, you might see someone in there that's a little bit like yourself. I'd say there's no right or wrong decision when it comes to annuity or drawdown. A lot of the time it comes down to personal preference. Matthew, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you're spot on. It's an art, not a science, so make sure you understand your options and get good advice.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you very much for watching. We've got new episodes every Tuesday. Like and subscribe, and see you next time.